when we say unified, it's having visibility of my business under one hood. And what's super critical is being timely. No one wants to be able to say, yeah, I'm going to pay you tomorrow, Vanessa, and let's hope it works out. Let's hope it works out.
There's no confidence in your partners,
absolutely.
clients,
Yeah. So it's making sure there's confidence, right? Like that's really important. Trust is super important, and especially when you're dealing in a cross-border environment, super critical.
Corporate services provider definitely evolved from just purely an admin tick-the-box kind of checklist to a potential business partners that can open up way more doors for you. In fact, it's the other way around, whereby the corporate services provider has so much ideas, so much connections that they want to actually give to the client, but the client can't actually accept it because like, oh, sorry, I'm not ready for that infrastructure. Right?
Really? Every business starts with ambition, to build something bigger than where it began. But somewhere between the first international order and becoming a truly global business, things get more complicated. New markets, new systems, new ways of operating. And suddenly, growth isn't just about selling more. It becomes about making decisions across borders. So how do businesses keep moving? What breaks first? What separates businesses that expand from businesses that endure? Let's find out. This is Borderless Ambitions, the definitive podcast exploring how global commerce is changing through the real experiences of operators across Asia Pacific. No playbooks, no polished success stories, just honest conversations about growth, trade-offs, and what it really takes to build beyond borders. I'm Vanessa Ho. Welcome to Payoneer Borderless Ambitions. Today, businesses don't have to wait years before going global anymore. A startup can source from one country, hire remotely in another, sell internationally online, and receive payments globally, almost from day one. But while growth has become borderless, many businesses are still operating on financial systems built for a single market. So what happens when companies scale faster than the infrastructure underneath them? And how can SMEs and service providers build smarter from the very beginning instead of rebuilding later on? Welcome to Borderless Ambitions by Payoneer. Today, we're talking about the financial foundations of cross-border growth. We'll explore why the financial and operational decisions businesses make early on can either accelerate global expansion or quietly slow it down later. Joining us today are the Executive Growth Leader, SVP, and Head of APAC of Payoneer, Nagesh Devata, and Founder of Corporate Service Provider Network and Eternity, Eldred.
Hi, everyone. My name's Nagesh Devata. I lead Payoneer's business across Asia Pacific. It's one of our most diverse and fastest growing regions across the globe. And we are really focused on helping SMBs in their journey to go global and to be able to scale their business.
Nice. Hi guys, my name is Eldred. Proud to name my company after my son. So I'm the founder of Eternity, and what we really do is mergers and acquisition for Singapore SMEs that are often overlooked by investment bankers. But for today, I actually wear another hat as well. So it's actually our non-profit Corporate Services Provider Network, whereby we actually gather corporate services providers together to talk about AI, compliance, as well as M&A.
Now let's get started. Nagesh, Eldred, thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure is all mine.
Yeah, it's a delight to be here today.
Why do you think it's so important to have this conversation today more than any other times now?
I think it's so relevant today, just given the way the world is right now and the way businesses are transforming, small businesses especially. We're exposed to them all the time and just seeing the potential, the opportunity, the challenges they face. And I think it's really something that's just right around us right now.
Yeah, I think like for small businesses, oftentimes they actually need a lot of help to punch above their weight class. So there's no better time but now.
And I'm so glad to have both of you on the show today. You guys are expert in the field. I think a huge part of why we are discussing this topic today is because businesses traditionally think about global expansion after they're established wide enough. And I'm sure you see that in both your roles. But when is it too early to think about global expansion? How do people know whether they're ready or not to think global from an infrastructure layer plus operations and scale up? Nagesh?
Well, from my perspective, I don't think it's ever too early. So if I'm an SME and I'm ambitious and I want to grow, I really would be thinking, how do I grow beyond my borders? My borders being my home market. So I want to plan for that. I want to think about what do I need to do as I go on this journey and think, at what point am I going to scale beyond my home market? And what do I need to do to make that a reality? So I think it's so critical to build that at least into the mindset and then into your planning and then into your execution.
And what are some of the earliest signs that businesses are already becoming global even before the founders realize it?
Well, I think one of the earliest signs is when you start to see customers who are interested in your products or services who are not from your home market. And when you start to buy goods and services to help your business. And those are suppliers that are outside of your home market. You may think you're just trying to solve something in your home market, but in reality, you're already building the ingredients of that successful equation to go global. And that's something I would say everybody should be thinking about as early as possible.
Eldred, I'm so glad you're here today because you work with businesses from across different stages. Do you think that business owners identify this shift and these earlier signs that Nagesh just shared early enough? Or are they a bit slow in picking up the signs that they and not picking up speed in terms of planning for cross-border expansion already?
Yeah, so actually here's actually a hot take. Like personally myself, I think like Eternity should only be in Singapore. I just want to spend as much time with my son. But truth of the matters is you could actually find collaborators everywhere in the world, right? Ideally speaking, I would like to dominate in Singapore, but there's a bandwidth to where I am, right? Can you imagine if I find a similar Eldred elsewhere in the world, whereby we can actually collaborate, etc.? That naturally goes into cross borders. Second point as well, I think a lot of businesses always think that, hey, my ideal customer profile is X, it's not Y. But as they slowly grow and evolve, they soon realize that the world is their oyster, right? Not only in terms of, let's say, clients, but also in terms of vendors, in terms of payments, and it goes on and on, right? Oftentimes, when you can actually look at it from a broader perspective, it's easier to kind of actually plan the structure from day one rather than play catch-up game later on. So yeah.
And especially for markets like Singapore, where you also started your business, does that change how founders think about starting the business from day one, setting up the infrastructure, the foundation?
Yeah. So for myself, I'm not a corporate service provider, but I actually buy and sell them, right? So for corporate service provider, oftentimes the ultimate beneficiary owner, or what we call UBO, comes from everywhere from the world. Some of them actually have big businesses from their home country looking to expand, and it could be vice versa as well, right? Even for the Singapore government as well, right? We can't actually place emphasis on like expansion, multiple grants that we can actually help to actually expand outwards as well. But how do we actually practically do that? Oftentimes, the business owners are too busy doing their day-to-day firefighting, right? But they fail to kind of actually plan from day one. So I think it's super important, especially when you want to build an investor-ready business. So yeah.
And Nagesh, besides a mindset shift, what are some considerations for business owners looking to expand globally from day one? And some of the tips and tricks that you have up your sleeves?
Well, some of the tips and tricks, I'm not sure they're tips and tricks, but I think some of the things that any business owner or aspiring, entrepreneur needs to think about is, as Eldred mentioned, like some of it is, why do we come to Singapore? Of course, businesses come here to raise capital, raise funds. It's a destination for that. It's a place to be able to create legitimacy, the right infrastructure, the right way to represent yourself around the world to businesses around the world.
Yeah.
So I think those are all elements of what an SME needs to do. I think it's personally, you want to build that into your plan and your vision.
Yeah.
Unless you're so clear, you never have an aspiration or an ambition to go beyond, say, Singapore. I think the reality is being in Singapore, we all understand that equation. Your ambition is to look beyond, whether it's in Southeast Asia, globally. That to me is building that infrastructure, and things like corporate service providers, I think are part of that equation that can help you build the infrastructure. I would come back to that word infrastructure, right? Like these are things you're going to be using further down the road. They may not be today, but you want to have that infrastructure to be able to scale.
Yeah, speaking of infrastructure and systems, when businesses are still small, a lot of shortcuts are taken, right? It's efficient, people get lazy, and they do things as like a one-man show or a small team. It's easy to manage everything manually with the way you store data, with the way you make payments, or just open another account, track things very manually. Because at that stage, growth sometimes feels more important than structure. And you can also see everything when you have a small team. But what are some of the financial or operational decisions that feel manageable early on, but become pretty expensive to fix later on?
So from my perspective, I think, again, I'll use the word infrastructure, right? And you're right. It is one of those things that maybe you feel is a trade-off in the early days. And it's a very natural thing to do. And I think all of us might consider that. But again, we're not telling somebody to over-index and say, go build the infrastructure for 5 years down the road and to build a infrastructure for 1,000, person company.
Because it gets expensive as well.
It's expensive and it's a very normal thing. Yeah. And you're focused on growth at this point in time and where you are in your journey. But I do think there are elements of just keeping an eye open of what those pieces are. Like, how do I optimize my business? How do I, represent myself around the world? And to me, those are the critical things that you can start doing up front. And, I think just like individuals, we don't want to manage 20 bank accounts. None of us do, right?
None.
Like that's the reality. Yeah. And so some of that is a balance. And I would say some of it is something to make sure an aspiring or an established SME that's in this journey is aware of their options. To me, that's a really critical, requirement. And that's where I see from a financial services point of view, that's what we're trying to do to be able to create those options for them.
But where do you see friction show up first? Is it usually in reporting, cash flow visibility, compliance, or multi-market coordination?
Where I see some of those frictions, at least from the experience we hear from customers, is complexity. So complexity creates a friction, right? The reality again is, and Singapore is a sort of that perfect market for it, right? Like, because smallish market, but we're going after the world, and then you have to manage multiple currencies. So if I sell to 5 customers just in Southeast Asia, that's 5 currencies I now have to deal with. If I buy my goods from 3 different suppliers around the world, 3 different currencies I have to manage. So even if I'm not thinking to be intentional about it, it just happens to me, right? Even if I'm just selling in Singapore, let's say I don't sell to anyone outside of Singapore, but I buy my goods and services from somebody outside of Singapore. That already creates complexity. So being able to have all of this under one hood, so to speak, and being able to try to think about how you manage all of that, to me is complexity. And the last thing I would say on this, what we think about and why it matters, it's not just the complexity. It's really, I think about this in terms of customer experience. How do I present this to my customers? If my customers are frustrated in interacting with me, then my business doesn't grow. 100%. So really, that's, to me, is super critical, is complexity, creating the right experience for my customers.
I like how you talk about the complexity, doing a lot of cross-border transactions. And I think now it's even more important given the volatility of currencies around the region right now and across Southeast Asia. Plus also when you are not simple enough and you don't have a bird's eye view of your accounts and you don't have a consolidated view, you might need more float as a business just to manage, whether it's like ordering inventory or receivables. And that becomes even more stress on the cash flow. What about you, Eldred? What do you see as some of the biggest friction points earlier on when a company goes cross-border?
So I'll use the example for corporate services as well, right? We all can actually agree Singapore is a very expensive place. So when you can actually look at like the arbitrage in terms of, let's say, costing, etc., you naturally would have ideally employees overseas. In Singapore, because we are just a bridge across to Johor, typically corporate services do actually have their actually back-end office in Johor or even in KL and maybe like Philippines, etc. When you actually start off your initial business, you always think about it, hey, where can I actually get my customer right away? You don't actually really think about how can I actually service them better or what's the most efficient way. So I usually actually break it down to 3 different stages, right? The first stage is like, I just want to firefight. I just want to survive the next day. And these people will never think about infrastructure, which is actually a huge mistake because they will be in that stage they think it's just going to be 1 month. It's just going to be 1 month. And then it drags out to 3 months. It drags out to 6 months. And in a year, there's so much backlog that I have to chase right now. Let me get a proper like corporate services provider to help me, right? And it's really penny wise, pound foolish because you take way more effort, way more money to correct the error from day one. So I truly agree with Nagesh in terms of infrastructure. But how do you kind of actually look at it like not a cost center, but more towards a growth partner? So oftentimes when you're actually looking at partnerships, right, you want to look at a partnership that is able to grow with you. And how do you actually grow together is ideally when the infrastructure in place is ever evolving and growing and they are fast to changes. So I think that's my definition of good infrastructure.
And do you see this trend across sectors?
I would say so. Why? Is because it's always finding the gaps and the arbitrage that you can actually tackle, right? Oftentimes, yes, you want your revenue either in Singapore, Australia, Hong Kong, where the currency is stronger. But when you're looking at your costs, right, naturally it's the other countries. But flip it the other way around as well, right? If you are looking at it from a Singapore lens, Singapore business, yes. But what about other countries other companies from other countries? They are all also thinking about the same way. So naturally, not only yourself as like the person that is executing the business, but your partners, your vendors, they're all thinking about cross-border already. So would you want to actually work with somebody who's already ready for cross-border? Or would you want to actually play a catch-up game, right? It's really foolish to not start from day one. So yeah.
Yeah, not just working with partners and vendors, but also having a good view of your business health and quality. When everything is all over the place, you don't truly know how healthy your business is, right? Now, let's stay with this idea. And I think fragmentation doesn't usually announce itself. Businesses don't often realize there's a problem until growth starts slowing down. And by then, sometimes it's too late.
Too late.
Your competitors might already be ahead of you, right? So Nagesh, what operational problems usually emerge first when systems become fragmented?
Well, some of the operational problems that we observe are currency management, as we've touched on, right? Like, so that's one. Reporting, operational challenges. A lot of these are things because when we are connecting, when an SME is connecting to any sort of financial service provider, there are elements of financial compliance, KYC, who are their vendors, where's the money coming from, our source of funds. These are all challenges. And the reality is, whether you're dealing with a very large traditional bank who probably will have no patience for you, versus dealing with a fintech, which is what we are, and maybe a little bit more nimble, willing to look at you in a different light. These are immediate challenges, right? And when you think about it, where those frictions arise, right? Like, let's just take it in terms of simple use cases. I need to buy goods or services, or I need to buy my supplies from a vendor that's sitting, let's say, in China or Korea or Japan. I need to be able to do that. They have the same concerns as, as I, as an SME in Singapore would have, right? So they're looking at it with the same lens. Can I trust you? Can I operate with you? What's your documentation? Are you an approved customer? Are you an approved vendor?
Yeah.
All of the same realities. Same thing eventually when you go further down the road. Like, I do think you face the same challenges. Well, from a customer point of view, you want to make sure you represent yourself as a legitimate business. You can deliver your goods and services on time. So making that promise. And I think this even becomes more amplified when we start to talk about business to business, relationships across, the businesses that we serve. And I think in the context of this and in the context of Singapore, this is a lot of where the activity is sitting. It's sitting in that B2B trade of goods and services. So really important there.
It sounds like what you're saying right now is that payments have already moved beyond just a finance function. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Beyond finance, I think a lot of this, I was thinking about this as we were coming over for this podcast. I was thinking, I think if you went back a few years ago, people thought of finance or fintech or any of this as the plumbing. And I think the plumbing has moved on. Yes, it's plumbing, it's infrastructure, but it's experience. It's about, we talk about risk. It's about confidence. It's about credibility to the other stakeholder on the other side. And we're dealing in a world which is predominantly virtual.
Yeah.
I like to think about this as like, what we're doing is we're creating that handshake between myself and somebody somewhere else in the world. And that's the element of trust.
And how does payments influence your growth rate and your business expansion? And how can it become a competitive advantage for a business?
I personally think so. And maybe coming from the fintech industry, I'm slightly biased about that. But I do think it's a competitive advantage. If you have an infrastructure or a platform that works, you're able to take you're able to meet the choices of somebody on the other side, being able to pay someone on the other side. And what's super critical is being timely, right? Like if I say I'm going to pay you, Vanessa, and I'm going to pay you tomorrow, I need to be able to follow up on that. And that's really important that it lands in your account when it's intended to land in your account. No one wants to be able to say, yeah, I'm going to pay you tomorrow, Vanessa, and let's hope it works out.
There's no confidence in your partners, clients, everything.
So it's making sure there's confidence, right? Like that's really important. Trust is super important, especially when you're dealing virtually and especially when you're dealing in a cross-border environment. Super critical.
Yeah, I think even more so especially in Singapore, right? An Asia context, trust is everything. Trust is what you do, what you say you would do, right? And you will execute it. Oftentimes, especially back then when I was an operator and I transfer, etc. Sorry, the bank is rejecting my letter and therefore there's another 3 days delay of the transfer. That doesn't cut it out, right? Streamlining all of this is pivotal, and especially in today's day and age, there is absolutely no more excuses, right? That's why infrastructure is so important from day one.
And what are some of the opportunities that businesses can unlock with the right payment and financial infrastructure, Eldred?
Plenty, right? I think Nagesh can actually mention it a little as well, right? If you have so many competitors out there and you actually have a business deal where overseas, they can actually work with you, but there are so many others that you can choose from, but you clearly can actually tell them like your profile is, hey, I can actually do what I say, right? Payment will be X amount. It will be in X amount of days. And this is something that I can stick to it, right? Trust is always compounded. And oftentimes when you are looking for various providers, vendors, yes, in Asia context, it's always word of mouth, right? People can actually refer each other and that's crucial and pivotal. But how do you even get that referral in the first place, right? It's by gaining that trust. And how do you get that trust? By doing what you're saying, right? So it's really a compounded effect. And sadly, in the business world, money talks, right? And money doesn't talk in terms of just the amount, in terms of the timeliness of how it comes in, right? Every single time when we are dealing with, especially for corporate services, because they do accounts for 70% of the SMEs in Singapore, right? These SMEs are fighting day and night just to make sure that ends meet, cash flow is met. But how can you do so if, let's say, cash is not really in the bank, right? So it always goes back to trust building, especially with a proper infrastructure. So yeah.
And Nagesh, when we talk about unified financial infrastructure, what does that mean for SMEs?
For me, what I think about unified financial infrastructure is really, again, I come back to the earlier point I made. Do you want a series of relationships? Do you want 20 relationships, which I've seen many SMEs with, right? Like, and it's not intentional, right? Like it just happens over time. I have a relationship with my bank. I may have another one with a fintech. I may have one with a service provider that provides some elements of what somebody else does. And it's a piecemeal. And I think from an ideal perspective, when we say unified, it's kind of one of those terms that's been used in the industry a lot. At least for me, I think about it is it's having visibility of my business, at least from a money movement perspective, under one hood to be able to see it, right? Like I paid my supplier X in this currency. I've received this much from somebody else in another currency. I get to see where my money is, transparency, it's visibility. And I get to be able to decide when am I going to take my money out of this account and move it to another bank account. I really see it as being able to create a unified view of everything. And ultimately then for me to be able to have more control, more influence on how do I want to manage it. And I would say where sort of the industry is going is as more payment options, more payment choices are being brought in, different customers, different things. I want that under one. I don't want to manage 20 providers.
Nobody wants that.
Another operational challenge that is the most boring thing to talk about is reconciliation.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, I know. I can already imagine the eye roll, not just on you, but on everybody. It's something you have to do, but nobody really want to spend too much time doing it, right? And a lot of growing businesses still spend hours matching transactions across different platforms, different markets as well. It's very painful. So how can digital solutions improve this process and make it less painful for business owners?
I guess it goes back to a couple of things. Number one, I think we live in a day and age whereby AI is taking over. This is not an AI podcast, but how do we kind of actually enable AI to do its thing, right? Nobody likes to actually reconcile thousands of entries, right? Back in the days when I was in an audit, that's what I do manually. Sadly, can you print out a bank statement? Can I actually match it? I have to highlight in yellow, like those were really the days. And that was not far. That was like probably like 12 years back, right? So many things have changed and evolved. But sadly, I think where money comes in, when money comes to place, the infrastructure hasn't really truly fully evolved for the local banks, right? For local banks, they are actually relatively comfortable with where they are. They have legacy, but to implement change is a bit tough. So when a lot of service providers, especially my clients' ideal customer profile, right? They are corporate services provider. They can actually do the reconciliation for their client. And oftentimes, they have to actually give it to sadly a lower entry level staff to kind of actually manually do it and then slowly move up the rank. But that is actually quite automatically done with fintech payment, right? As humans, oftentimes we want to actually make sure that we are doing the high leverage stuff and leaving technology to do the sadly admin and the monotonous stuff. And we have really evolved tremendously for the past, I guess, like 1-2 years, right? Nagesh, love your thoughts on that, man.
No, absolutely. And I have real experience this weekend. It's for my personal stuff where I was going through 2 years of statements and highlighting interest and, and then summing it up. True story this weekend. But I can imagine that's me just doing it from an individual perspective. Yeah. And if I'm an SME, that's just not a way to operate or to scale. Yeah. So if I can put that in, because again, I'm not going to throw it into AI. I need someone who I can trust. Right. And that's really, really important for me to be able to say, hey, you're going to take care of this. And I think this is the challenge for SMEs, is to know how to figure out, I think as Eldred said, like figure out what's a high value activity for me, because I'm resource scarce. Yeah. And where do I need to push some of these things that maybe I don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to push, and which partners do I use for that? And again, like I would say, there's lots of options and choices out there. And that's also the challenge for a lot of SMEs, is to try to figure it. So sometimes where we're trying to think, I can go to this guy for this and this guy for this, because you know what? I'm not coming back to your first question. I'm not thinking about what I'm trying to build, right? Yeah. And I'm just trying to get through to the next, 3 months.
It's reactive then proactive.
Yeah. Correct. And that, I think that's the right way to say it. And you're right, is how can I be proactive about all of this and start to think about, tying this back to my ambition?
We know there are a lot of sophisticated solutions out there, fintech or non-fintech, but what SMEs are always concerned about is cost visibility. With international payments, people are afraid of fees that are incurred later on, or FX fees that are not very transparent, and people only see the total cost of it at the end of it. So how important is fee transparency for SMEs managing international transactions today?
I think transparency is important. But again, I would say as a fintech, there's a slight nuance to this in terms of the way we approach it with our customers. Obviously, there are customers of different sizes, different scales, different needs, different complexity. And again, some of that matters. I come back to the point around trust. Trust matters, right? Do I want to work with somebody who is going to be in business, who's going to continue to be in business? You're putting it's not just putting your trust, you're putting your effort and everything you've done to build your business into this partner, right? Just as you would put and work with every other partner out there. And to me, that's super critical. So yes, transparency is important, but there is a balance of trying to achieve, the scale you want, the efficiency you want, the optimization you want. Thinking about that roadmap, where do I want to take my business? If my goal is just going from Singapore to one country and that's the end of it, maybe that influences my choices. But I think, the entrepreneurs I come across and the SMEs I come across in Singapore, whether they're already here in Singapore or setting up their business in Singapore, they all have ambitions to go global. And again, that really matters to them. So I think they look at it in a more holistic view.
I think so too. I fully agree with all the interactions with different founders that we see here in Singapore. And Eldred, from your perspective, how important is predictability?
Too important, right? Think about it. As an investor, what are you actually investing into? you usually want actually predictable cash flow, right? And that's why I think corporate services is so important, because it allows you to kind of actually have visibility while doing the books. But how do you kind of actually do that if, let's say, the bank account is lagging behind, right? When we are actually looking at like cash flow management, it's pivotal to actually have the right set of data and right set of cash at bank to the T at that point in time, right? A lot of corporate services or any business, in fact, when they're actually doing their forecasting, numbers can look very good, very great. But what is the main number they're looking at, and how accurate is that number? Oftentimes, the answer is like, I don't know, right? Are you taking a bull case, bear case, or a very safe approach? There are so much uncertainty. If, let's say, you would have to, sorry, I have to wait for my bank statement, and then I can probably actually tell it to you later. And I had those conversations as well, because in the past I was doing actually cross-border M&A, right? Whereby before COVID, if you're looking at a Philippine company or Indonesia company, they are not even in internet banking. They would really have that problem. They can't even give you that visibility. So much has changed in the past years, and now there is so much emphasis on how predictability is important for investors, but also for your financial decision and your operational decisions as well.
Yeah, especially if you're gearing up for exit, because you do a lot of M&A work.
Exactly.
If you're an international business who wants to be sold, your acquirer needs a good view. And if you can't prepare your books like quickly,
yep,
I'll be concerned. Like, do you really know your numbers?
Exactly, right?
Are you trying to smoke me as an acquirer?
But you know, sometimes it's not the fault of the SMEs. They try their best, but they can't, right? Because the infrastructure is not in place from day one, right? That's why it's so important to actually have proper infrastructure in place, so that you are able to kind of actually show at least a 95% accurate number, compared to like, sorry, I don't know, I'll have to get back to you.
So far, I think whatever we've been talking about, it seems like financial infrastructure has become more than just moving money across borders, right? It has really become an integral part about how businesses operate, compete, and also scale. And of course, businesses scale faster when the financial infrastructure scales with them, and every other foundation beneath them can scale with them. Now, I'd like to segue to another theme on corporate service providers. I know, Eldred, you're an expert on this.
Yep.
Traditionally, CSPs have played an important role in helping businesses incorporate or filing all the admin and compliance. But it has moved from how do I start a business to how do I actually help operate the business. So how does the role of CSPs evolve right now? Do they need a deeper understanding about the business operations?
Similar to what Nagesh kind of actually mentioned about like payments, just purely payments, and it kind of actually evolved. A lot of SMEs now actually are more savvy, and they are actually having too much resources and network to be able to choose corporate services, right? And I often kind of actually tell them, don't be penny wise, pound foolish. Why? Because corporate services providers could not just be your admin. They could be actually your ticket to a proper key vendor that you might have, a key business partner you might have, and maybe a key investor. So one example that I can actually give you is corporate services providers typically do the books for SMEs, right? And well, who would be best to kind of tell them, hey, your bank account is actually not doing too good, but your revenue and profit is growing. I have first insights to this. I potentially might even invest in you. And these are real scenarios, can only happen when there's actually proper visibility. So corporate services provider definitely evolved from just purely an admin tick the box kind of checklist whereby, hey, do you really do this? Have you filed your taxes? Have you actually filed your annual returns, etc., to a potential business partners that can open up way more doors for you. In fact, I would even actually say oftentimes it's the other way around, whereby the corporate services provider has so much ideas, so much connections that they want to actually give to the client, but the client can't actually accept it because like, oh, sorry, I'm not ready for that infrastructure. Right?
Really?
Yeah.
Because there's such a broad base of clients that they serve, right?
So like there's a running joke when we do our corporate services provider network CSPN meeting, whereby I say, hey, for corporate services provider, we don't have anything. What we have is many clients. Because minimally, each of them will probably have like 100, 200, right? But can you imagine like that 200 can actually be connected through each other, depending on which gap do they have, right? So I think it's really evolved from just a tick box exercise to potentially a business partner. And I have actually seen the reverse as well. Like even like corporate services looking to invest into such companies because they see the potential but they also see the cash flow gap and they just want to actually plug that in for that expedited growth. So yeah.
Speaking of expedited growth, I think it's very important to keep focusing on accelerating our time to operate. And one challenge that businesses often talk about is that when operating across market, it takes more than just legally incorporating the entity, right? Opening accounts can take a long time. Setting up payment workflows can also take a while,
Yeah.
and even payroll as well. Whether it's like collecting money, paying, hiring, operation setup takes a very long time, and that slows growth. Nagesh, can you tell us more about how partnerships and modern financial ecosystem are changing this experience for founders and business owners?
So from a partnership perspective, and maybe I'll just draw it as an example. I'm a founder from, let's say, South Asia. I want to go global. I have a great product or service. First step is I might come and incorporate in Singapore. And that's sort of number one. And I think we see that as very much, how do we partner and bring that service to that SME or that founder, whether they're in South Asia or East Asia, but showing them that Singapore can be that destination for them. I think it's super important. Part of it is they may think, let me go to the flashiest place or the flashiest hub around the world. And I won't name those, but they're there.
Yeah.
They're there. And again, I'm maybe English is not my first language, or maybe I don't understand sort of how the financial infrastructure works in Singapore. So that can be a challenge, right? Like, because as Eldred said, like, relationships and referrals are super important. So they may point them in a direction. Maybe that's not the right direction, just maybe because that's what they know. But to me, like, the CSP community, this entire function is super critical to be able to say, here, let me help you land on that destination, whether it's Singapore or whether it's somewhere else. I think that's first. So Singapore very much is a launch pad, right? It's one, it's a destination to come and incorporate, but two, it's a launch pad to go global. And that's not an easy thing to do. And I don't think anyone can navigate that complexity. You don't want to work with, again, multiple partners, multiple CSPs around the world. I want to work with one. I want to work with one who's going to take me on that journey, help me navigate it. And if they can't navigate it, connect me to somebody who will help me navigate it. And to me, that's really, really critical.
Yes, on partnerships, Eldred, do you agree with Nagesh? And what's your approach with ecosystem partnerships? This could include fintechs, banking partners, operation and solution providers.
There's a reason why CSPN is kind of actually here right now, right? Because I would say at the end of the day, who actually has the relationship and the trust? And you can only build it when you can actually have it compounded with many people kind of actually having the same alignment of interest and goals. For a lot of CSPs, they want to actually have options. They want to have options for their clients as well. Maybe clients are saying that, hey, I want to actually open this specific bank because I have this specific bank in my native country. But can you actually execute the things that you are supposed to do? So go back to the same thing, right? Whereby I can actually mention for corporate services provider, they're not the tick of the box. You want this, I'll do it for you. They're actually advisors that they can actually give proper advice. And how do we actually give proper advice? Only when you actually build a relationship and trust with a payment provider that could make sense, right? And a platform and an infrastructure that could make sense. So for me, I think that's the way we look at things.
And what does a future-ready corporate service provider look like?
Definitely something that is able to actually be tech-enabled or AI-enabled, right? A key thing as well, everything is moving so fast nowadays. We can't actually afford to have paper bank forms. We can't afford to have even like PDF forms to kind of be filled up so that we can actually incorporate such things. For a fintech provider and definitely a neobank, the key thing is always going to be how fast can we actually do it with proper compliance, and is it really truly tech-enabled? A lot of corporate services provider right now, they are actually at the age of like, should I actually evolve, right? Even for the Singapore government, they are focusing on two sectors, right? One, accounting. Two, legal. And this is I'm going all in terms of AI. How can we actually do that? And if the infrastructure is not ready for AI, then how do you kind of actually implement those? So I think that is how we can actually look at things.
Exactly. And what I'm hearing is that the opportunity for CSPs isn't simply helping businesses to get started. It's helping the businesses and their clients become operationally faster with fewer blind spots and fewer rebuilds later on as well. And for the businesses listening today, the takeaway is quite simple. Growth isn't only just about ambition, but it's also about readiness, because the companies that scale well are often the ones that design their operating foundations before growth demanded it, which is what we're talking about, being proactive instead of reactive. All right, now before we wrap up, I would like to end with some practical advice, but also quick fire questions, okay? One line to answer whatever comes top of mind from all your years of experience. Okay, Nagesh, first one for you. What's one operational decision businesses should make early if they plan to scale internationally?
Have one relationship for all your business globally.
And Eldred, what's the biggest mistake companies make when building for cross-border growth?
Not planning early and going all in for relationship.
What's one way CSP can evolve their value proposition today?
Having visible cash flow and ensuring that clients are truly happy by doing what they say they would do.
And Nagesh, what operational challenges are SMEs struggling with most now?
The challenges would be around complexity, dealing with multiple vendors and multiple buyers, and planning for growth.
And final advice for business owners who are looking to get their competitive advantage from both of you.
My final advice would be that any of these relationships, whether it's a fintech or a CSP, they're growth drivers. And that's the way they should be looked at.
Eldred?
For me, it would be a hot take. It's never too early to identify what would be the ideal investor profile in the far future, and then working backwards to kind of actually build that. And that would kind of actually link back to proper infrastructure from day one. So yeah.
Oh, wow. Those are two very brilliant advice. And I really think today's conversation highlights a major shift in how businesses should think about growth. For SMEs listening, the message is really clear. Design for future markets now, not just your current market. And for CSPs like the one Eldred worked with, the post-incorporation journey may become your biggest opportunity for long-term value creation, and even tapping on the CSP's wide network of clients as well. And for both parties, infrastructure readiness often determines how fast businesses can scale globally, more than ambition alone. And with that, thank you so much, Nagesh and Eldred, for joining us on today's episode.
No, pleasure is all mine.
Yeah, it was delightful to be here today.
And thank you all for listening to Borderless Ambitions by Payoneer. If today's conversation sparked ideas around building smarter systems for global growth, make sure to hit subscribe and explore more resources from Payoneer on scaling businesses across borders. Until next time.
Oh, bye.
Growth beyond borders is rarely a straight line. It's shaped by decisions, trade-offs, and the willingness to keep moving, even when the path isn't fully clear. And behind every business expanding into something bigger are people learning, adapting, and building as they go. Thank you for joining us on Payoneer Borderless Ambitions. Don't forget to follow Payoneer on all social media platforms and subscribe for more updates. Until next time, keep thinking bigger, stay curious, and keep building beyond borders.